My name is Gloria, and I was 29 years old. My life was accounted for down to the last cent, like the bookkeeping at the Charlotte pharmaceutical firm where I worked as a sales representative. It wasn't a calling, just a job that reliably covered the bills for my one-bedroom den and provided a vague yet reliable illusion of stability. I lived alone, within four walls that obeyed only my quiet rules, and in this autonomy lay a bitter, independent peace. My family, my parents, and my 25-year-old sister, Kelly, lived 40 minutes away, in a different world. Kelly had been the golden child from her earliest days, her existence one long, sunny day, unmarred by a single cloud. In childhood, she got a spacious room with a walk-in closet, while my lot was a cubbyhole where a single bed and a desk waged a perpetual war for every square inch. Her outfits were fresh, smelling of ironed paper from mall boutiques. Mine were hand-me-downs from cousins or dug up in thrift stores. When she was struck by the desire to dance at a trendy studio for $200 a month, the money appeared instantly. When I dreamed of a laptop for college, I was politely advised to find a job. And so, for 3 years, I immersed myself in the aromatic world of a downtown coffee shop, returning every evening reeking of smoke and sour milk, only to finally clutch the coveted plastic casing in my hands. But all that is ancient, dust-covered history, isn't it? We've all been adults for a long time. For the last 7 years, ever since my father needed expensive back surgery and they sank neck-deep in medical debt, I had been faithfully transferring $400 monthly to our joint account. Over the years, it added up to a substantial sum, over $30,000. But isn't that what family duty is about? They never once said thank you, but I naively hoped they quietly appreciated my sacrifice. Anyway, March 15th was approaching, the day I was to turn 30. Reluctantly, I booked a table at one of those pleasant downtown restaurants, a step above the democratic Applebee's but shunning ostentatious luxury. 2 weeks prior, I called my parents to secure their attendance. "Of course we'll be there, sweetie," my mother's velvety voice sounded through the receiver. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." My father, taking the phone, just grunted in confirmation. "We'll be there by 7. I honored my sister with a separate call. "You'd better be there," I said, and my voice held not a playful threat, but a steely necessity. "You only turn 30 once." Yeah, I'll be there," she replied distractedly, the tapping of her fingers on a phone screen audible in the background. "Gotta go, bye." And so, the day arrived. I entered the restaurant's dimly lit hall 15 minutes before the appointed time, feeling the weight of the new dress I had bought specially for the evening. Gradually, the table began to fill. Sarah, my colleague in misfortune, Mike and Jennifer, my neighbors from the apartment building, my cousin Rachel, Aunt Barbara and Uncle Tom. By 7:45, everyone was seated around the polished table except for the 3 most important guests. 3 chairs brazenly stood empty, like unfilled blanks in an important document. "Shall we maybe start ordering?" Sarah asked solicitously, nodding towards the gaping places. "Just a moment, I'll call them," I replied, clutching the cold body of my phone in my palm. My mother's voice on the line was brief and soulless. My father didn't answer at all. Kelly's call was rejected before the first ring. "Probably stuck in traffic." I forced a smile, feeling it crack at the corners. You know, rush hour. 7:30 came and went, and the empty chairs remained a silent reproach. The waiter, elegant and increasingly annoyed, returned to our table with enviable regularity, and with each of his visits, the atmosphere at the table thickened, becoming more viscous and unbearable. My friends whispered amongst themselves, their anxiety beginning to take on a thick, almost tangible form. The awkwardness grew with each minute, hanging in the air between the clinking of glasses and strained smiles. Aunt Barbara kept throwing glances at me, soaked in such concentrated sympathy that I wanted to sink through the patterned carpet. "You know what? Let's just order," I exhaled at 7:45, surrendering under the weight of the collective silent expectation. "They'll join us when they arrive." The order was placed. Appetizers arrived, elegant tartlets and brioche with pâté, then salads where every leaf of radicchio seemed like a mockery. They still weren't there. Under the table, in the shadow of the tablecloth, my fingers frantically typed message after message, which stubbornly remained delivered, but not read. When the main course arrived, tender salmon in lemon sauce, the hope inside me finally thinned, became transparent, like glass. But I kept stretching my lips into a semblance of a smile, knowing that the slightest crack in this facade would expose the full depth of my humiliation. "I need to use the restroom," I announced, pushing back my chair and leaving half of the fish untouched on my plate. Locked in the cool stall, I finally allowed my trembling fingers to reach for the Instagram icon. The need to distract myself from the burning shame was physical, and there, at the very top of the feed, it awaited me. A picture posted by Kelly an hour ago, a selfie in a dazzlingly bright airport hall. In one hand, she held a blue passport cover, in the other, a boarding pass. The caption cut my eyes. "Off to Barcelona. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for making my dream come true. I've worked so hard, I deserve this." My hands shook harder. I scrolled down to the comments. There was Mom. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You deserve this break. You are the only one we are truly proud of. Have a wonderful time." The only one. The word hung in the air, poisoning it. The only one they are truly proud of. It wasn't enough for them to just express delight. They had to drive in that blade, that tiny reminder of who I was, the eternal disappointment, the afterthought. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had consciously chosen to take Kelly to the airport to send her to Barcelona, on a trip they paid for. I splashed my face with icy water, trying to wash away the heat of humiliation, fixed my smudged eyeliner, and returned to the table with a mask of serenity on my face. "Something came up for them," I said, taking my seat again, "but they insisted we continue without them." "What a pity," Jennifer sighed, but in her eyes I read not sympathy, but the very pity I feared most. The dinner drew to a close. My friends sang Happy Birthday, their voices merging into an off-key but sincere chorus. The restaurant presented a small chocolate cake crowned with a single candle. I blew it out, making one single wish: to stop yearning for those who obviously didn't need me. When the last crumbs of dessert disappeared from the plate, my phone finally vibrated. A message from Mom. "Sorry, dear. We were busy all day and are just exhausted now. Hope the dinner went well." And that was it. No congratulations, no explanations, no apologies for the ruined dinner. Just, "We're busy." Yes, busy seeing my sister off on her dream vacation. A few days later, already home, I poured myself a glass of red wine, sank onto the sofa, and stared at the ceiling. All those years, 7 long years, and the monthly $400 transfers I had sent, without a single miss, flashed before my eyes. Not once had they said thank you. Not once had they even hinted that they noticed my sacrifice. And then, like a lightning strike in a cloudless sky, it hit me. Where did they, who constantly complained about their financial abyss, get the funds for this spectacular trip for Kelly? After all, it was their endless complaints about debt, Father's medical bills, the mortgage, utilities, that had made me extend a helping hand. My heart pounded somewhere in my throat as I opened my laptop and entered the password for our joint account. I hadn't checked it for months, content with the role of a silent donor with an autopay set up. The number on the screen made me freeze. The balance showed a measly $15,000. Where had all my money gone? I began frantically scrolling through the transaction history, and the picture emerged in heartbreaking clarity. 3 days ago, a payment to a travel agency for $3,800. 2 weeks ago, rent for some boutique, $2,200. And the crown jewel was a transfer to Kelly's personal account, $10,000, with a concise note, gift. My $10,000. I sat, peering at the flickering screen, and mentally calculated the bitter balance. 7 years of deprivation, $30,000, turned into shopping and European vacations for my sister, while I drowned my hunger with cheap noodles just to save up for rent. The next morning started with a phone call. Kelly, from the intoxicating air of Barcelona. "Oh my God, Gloria, you just can't imagine what an incredible place this is," she squealed, not even bothering with a greeting. "The hotel Mom and Dad booked is right on La Rambla, and the view from the rooftop? They really went all out. And they gave me $10,000 for spending money. Can you even imagine?" "Amazing, Kelly," I replied in a flat, lifeless voice. "Aren't you happy for me?" Her tone instantly turned prickly. "What's your problem?" Without answering, I hung up, simply pressing the red button, and tossed the phone onto the sofa. The next 3 days I spent in a cold, calculated rage, plotting my countermove. The account was in my name, which meant the money in it was essentially mine. I started moving it. Not all at once, not everything. That would cause panic. 1,000 here, 2 there, at different times of the day. By the end of the 3rd day, all 15,000 lay in my personal account. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a monotonous workday, the phone rang. "Gloria, we have a serious problem." My father's voice was pierced with panic. 15,000 is missing from our account. We need to call the police immediately. It's theft. I laughed, shortly, bitterly, unable to hold back. "Dad, I took it. The money I saved for 7 years. "That's our joint money," he shouted. "It was for a rainy day." "Is Kelly's trip to Barcelona the rainy day?" I asked. In response, there was a deathly silence, and after 10 seconds, the dial tone sounded. 2 hours later, the phone rang again. Mom. "How could you do this to us?" she attacked from the get-go, without preamble. "We are so disappointed in you, Gloria. This is incredible selfishness." "Disappointed? In me?" I repeated, feeling the blood rush to my temples. "Wow. You know what, Mom? I'm disappointed in you, too." My voice sounded cold and even, contrasting with her hysterical notes. "Do you remember what happened 2 weeks ago?" There was a short pause, filled only by her heavy breathing. "What are you talking about?" she responded, and her tone held genuine bewilderment. "My birthday. My 30th birthday. The dinner you promised to come to but didn't because you were seeing Kelly off at the airport, on a vacation you paid for with my—" I didn't finish, letting her figure out the end of the sentence herself. "The money? Oh, well, that was planned in advance," she began to justify, but I hung up, cutting off this dialogue that had become utterly meaningless to me. Late at night, when the clock hands approached 2, and in Barcelona the morning was just beginning, my phone exploded with messages. "Kelly, you're a terrible person. How could you do this to Mom and Dad? You need to return that money immediately. You're ruining everything." I read every line, feeling not a burning resentment, but a strange, soul-chilling calm, after which I methodically deleted them one by one. It brought almost physical relief. The next morning, I woke up with an unusual feeling of clarity. If they could so easily squander my funds, then I would find a worthy use for them. I remembered an advertisement for a medical billing course, 6 months of training, $9,000, and at the end, a profession promising an income far more substantial than a sales representative's salary. That same day, I registered for the course, and in a single payment transferred 9 of the 15,000 I had reclaimed to pay for the tuition. It was the first truly sensible decision in many years. I threw myself into my studies, evenings with lectures, weekends with homework. In my free time, I started meeting friends, and even agreed to a date with Tom, a nice guy from my gym. The phone rang incessantly. Mom, Dad, Kelly. I just forwarded all calls to voicemail. Their messages, first full of desperation, then anger, and finally humiliated pleas, I deleted without regret. A month after my financial coup, there was an insistent, aggressive knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents. "Gloria, open this door right now," my father roared, pounding his fist on the wood. I stood still in silence, hoping they would leave. "We know you're in there. Your car is in the parking lot," my mother shouted. The knocking turned into a real racket, making the door frame shake. My neighbor across the hall looked out with alarm on his face. "If you don't stop, I'll call the police," I said loudly enough for both them and the neighbor to hear. "You wouldn't dare," my father growled. I took out my phone and dialed 911. They left. Through the peephole, I saw them walking away down the corridor dejected, my mother sobbing, my father purple with impotent rage. Another month later, an email arrived. The subject was dry. Formal demand. They demanded the return of the 15,000 and an apology to Kelly for the spoiled trip. I reread it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then I typed a brief response. "I owe you nothing. That money was given to pay for medical bills and necessities. You spent it on Kelly. If you want it back, get it from her. Sent." There was no reply, and that was the end of it. 5 months flew by unnoticed. I diligently ground away at my medical billing studies, scoring top marks on all tests. One day after class, Susan, my instructor, gently touched my shoulder and took me aside. "Gloria, you're one of my strongest students," she said, and her eyes shone with sincere belief. I have a contact at the Carolina Medical Center. They're looking for someone in the billing department. $75,000 a year. Are you interested? Interested? I almost kissed her right there in the classroom, restraining a surge of boundless gratitude. The interview was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I showed up in my best suit, the one that had served me for years in pharmaceutical presentations, and answered every question with such focused passion, as if not just my career, but my entire future life depended on it, which, in essence, was the pure truth. 3 days later, the call came. The job was mine. I threw a modest party at my apartment. Pizza, wine, a handful of truly close friends. Sarah, Mike, Jennifer, and a few others who cared about me, not my role in the family. We laughed, raised glasses, and celebrated until 2 a.m. I posted a group photo on Facebook with the caption, "Proud of where I'm going. New job, new chapter, new me." And 3 days later, the mailman brought a card from my parents. A birthday card. 3 months late. "Happy birthday, dear. We are proud of you." A check for $1,000 was enclosed. Slowly, with cold calm, I tore both the card and this paper sign of their belated and hypocritical conscience into small pieces and sent them to the trash. On Monday, I started my new job. The billing department was a huge open space where about 30 people worked. My boss, Melissa, a woman in her 50s with impeccable posture and comprehensive knowledge of medical coding, gave me an orientation. "Work hard, show initiative, and in a year or two you could be aiming for a supervisor position," she said, and in her words I heard not an empty formality, but a real prospect. 3 weeks had passed when an email from my mother appeared in my inbox. Subject, urgent, read. "Gloria, your father lost his job. The company cut half of the accounting department. We haven't paid the mortgage for 3 months. We could lose the house. Please, we need help. Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed a reply. "I'm sorry to hear about Father's troubles, but I cannot help financially. Perhaps you should ask Kelly, since you could afford such a luxurious vacation for her. Good luck." That same evening, while cooking dinner, I heard a knock on the door. This time, not aggressive, but insistent, yet ordinary. I looked through the peephole. Kelly was standing on the doorstep. Against all common sense, I let her in. She settled on my sofa like a queen, setting aside her designer bag and surveyed my apartment with a look full of poorly concealed contempt. "You need to forgive Mom and Dad," she declared from the threshold, "and you have to help them. They're going to lose the house." "Why should I?" "Because they're your parents! God, Gloria, why are you so selfish? Is this all because of jealousy?" I silently walked over to the table, took out a printout of the bank statement I had kept all this time from a folder, and threw it onto her lap. "Take a look. March 1st. Transfer to Kelly. $10,000. She skimmed the line with an indifferent gaze. "So what? That was my gift for successfully finishing a project." "That was my money, Kelly. The money I sent to cover Father's medical bills. And you know what I got for my 30th birthday? Nothing. Not even a simple happy birthday text. Instead, you were enjoying a trip to the airport. Your vacation was more important than my celebration." "That's not true. They were proud of me," she tried to exclaim, but her voice faltered. "Mom wrote right in your Instagram that you are the only one they are proud of. The only one." Her face flushed a deep crimson. "You're being ridiculous. All of this, it's because you're jealous that they love me more." "You're right," I said quietly, but with icy clarity. "They do love you more. It's always been that way. You got the bigger room, new clothes from store windows, dance lessons at a trendy studio. I spent 3 years languishing in a stuffy coffee shop to save up for a laptop while everything was handed to you on a silver platter. And now you're 25, traveling the world on my money, and you have the audacity to call me selfish." Without another word, she grabbed her designer bag and rushed to the door. "You're impossible to talk to," she shouted already from the corridor. After she left, I felt an unexpected, all-encompassing lightness, as if a heavy stone that had been pressing on my chest for years had finally shifted, and I could breathe deeply for the first time in a long while. The next few days passed in unusual silence. No calls, no letters, no surprise visits. I began to hope they had finally learned their harsh lesson. However, one evening, scrolling through my Facebook feed, I came across a post from my mother. "My heart breaks when children so cruelly disappoint their parents," it read. Family should come first, but some choose selfishness over blood ties. Gloria chose money over family, and it's destroying us. Comments poured in instantly. Her friends vied to express sympathy, echoing, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. Modern children can be so ungrateful." But Mom had made a fatal mistake. She didn't know that 2 weeks ago I had created a private Facebook chat where I added everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, except her and Kelly. And there I had laid out the whole story. The ruined dinner, the shameful Instagram post, the trip to Barcelona, and, of course, the bank statements clearly showing where my money had gone. I posted all the screenshots. Therefore, when Aunt Barbara saw this pitiful post, she was armed. Her comment sounded like a gunshot. "Maybe you should look at your own actions first before blaming everything on Gloria?" Then Cousin Michael chimed in. "Didn't Gloria support you financially all these 7 years? Seems to me she was the one who always put family first." Rachel added, "I was at that ill-fated dinner. We all wondered where you had disappeared to. Now I understand. You were seeing Kelly off on a vacation paid for with Gloria's money." Uncle Tom simply stated, "Calling Gloria selfish is more than generous, given the circumstances." The comments continued to grow. My mother's friends fell into perplexed silence. In less than an hour, the post disappeared without a trace. I, meanwhile, continued to immerse myself in my work at the Carolina Medical Center, staying late, delving into every system, every code, every process. Melissa couldn't help but notice my zeal. After 3 months, she invited me into her office. "A position for assistant director is opening up," she said, studying me with an attentive gaze. "We usually require a year of experience, but I believe you're ready now. Would you like to give it a try?" Did I want to? Absolutely. The interview was a serious test. 3 rounds with different department heads. But I succeeded. 2 weeks later, Melissa invited me into her office again. "Congratulations, Assistant Director Gloria," she said, and the corners of her eyes crinkled with approving wrinkles. "You start on Monday." The salary increase was more than substantial. I was now earning more than I could have ever imagined in my wildest dreams back when I was pouring coffee to pay for my education. A couple of months after that memorable Facebook fiasco, my mother called. Her voice sounded different, muffled, almost cracked. "Gloria, could you come for dinner? Just dinner. Your father and I want to talk." I was ready to hang up, but some note in her tone, an uncharacteristic vulnerability, made me agree. "All right, but not for long." The following Saturday, I crossed the threshold of their house. It had changed beyond recognition. The lawn was overgrown with weeds. Mom's favorite flowers had dried up and wilted. Inside, it felt empty. The expensive paintings were gone, the elegant furniture replaced by simple, worn-out pieces. Kelly was already sitting at the dining table, stubbornly avoiding my gaze. "Thank you for coming," my father said, his face looking haggard, as if he had aged 10 years. Dinner was more than modest, spaghetti with a simple marinara sauce. They started with apologies that sounded rehearsed, like poorly practiced lines from someone else's play. "We're sorry we missed your birthday," my mother said. "We shouldn't have spent the money on Kelly's trip," my father added. "You said Kelly was the only one you were proud of," I retorted coldly, looking my mother straight in the eye. "I didn't mean it like that. It came out wrong. I'm proud of you too, Gloria." "Of what?" I pressed. "Name one achievement of mine that truly makes you happy." An oppressive silence hung in response. My mother helplessly opened and closed her mouth. My father stared at his plate, and Kelly fidgeted nervously on her chair. That's what I thought. "We're going to lose the house," my mother mumbled in a trembling voice. "Please, Gloria, we're desperate." "I won't give you any money," I stated firmly. "I gave you $30,000 over 7 years, and you spent it on vacations and shopping. I've had enough." That's when Kelly exploded. "You're destroying our lives. This is all your fault." "My fault?" I rose from my chair. I was the only one who actually supported them. "And what have you done, Kelly, besides spending their, or rather my, money on yourself?" I walked out, not finishing dinner. 6 months later, Melissa invited me to her office again. "A position for Director of Operational Revenue has opened up. If you want it, it's yours." At 31 years old, with a salary approaching 6 figures, I agreed without a second thought. I learned about my family's fate from secondary sources. Aunt Barbara, like a chronicler, faithfully supplied me with updates, though I never asked. They sold the house and moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. My father got a job at a small firm with half the salary. My mother started working part-time at a local department store. Kelly, rumor had it, got together with some Marcus and moved in with him after 3 months of dating. According to Rachel, she flatly refused to help our parents. "It's not my problem," the Golden Girl reportedly said, abandoning them in their time of need. And so they lost both daughters, the one who was an invisible shadow in the corner and the one who shone in the rays of their undivided love. A bitter irony of fate, subject only to the laws of higher justice, manifested here in all its inevitable fullness. 8 months after that ill-fated dinner, the mailman brought an envelope with my mother's familiar, tremulously guilty handwriting. "Dear Gloria," she wrote, "I've had a lot of time to rethink our whole life. Now I'm beginning to vaguely understand what you felt all those years. How we gave Kelly the brightest colors while you got only the faded shades. How we spent your money on her fleeting joys while you fought your windmill battles alone. How we preferred her vacation to your 30th birthday. Forgive me. I feel so bitter and ashamed. We failed as parents. We took you for granted, assuming you would always be there, silent, reliable, eternal. And when you finally found your voice, we dared to call you selfish. But you were never selfish. You were the most generous soul in this family, and we simply wiped our feet on you. I know we cannot expect forgiveness. I understand. But I wanted you to know I have finally seen the full depth of our wrong. If you ever feel like reaching out, we are here, but I will understand if that never happens. With love, Mom. P.S. We can't pay the rent this month. If you could—" I stopped reading before the end. The paper crumpled in my palm with such force as if I were trying to destroy not just the paper, but all the pain it carried. Even at the moment of what seemed like the highest repentance, she couldn't refrain from asking for money. Some things are truly timeless. Now I am 32. I am the director of operational revenue at one of the best clinics in North Carolina. I have a bright apartment in the heart of the city, a bank account that finally pleases the eye, and loyal friends whose presence doesn't depend on the whims of fate. I'm dating David from the IT department, a man who remembers my birthday without numerous reminders. I haven't spoken to my parents in over a year. I have no idea about Kelly, and, to be honest, it doesn't trouble me anymore. Aunt Barbara once mentioned that she broke up with that Marcus and was now couch surfing at friends' places. They say she approached our parents, but they, to everyone's astonishment, replied that they couldn't help her. The irony, one must say, is truly colossal. Do I sometimes feel guilt? Undoubtedly. They are, after all, my flesh and blood. But then memory resurrects that evening in the restaurant, the 3 empty chairs, and that very inscription on Instagram, the only one we are proud of. I remember 7 years of financial support that went without a single thank you, and $30,000 that vanished into thin air. And I understand. I am perfectly fine without them. Moreover, I live a full, conscious life. It turns out, when you stop expending spiritual energy on those incapable of appreciating that sacrifice, boundless sources of energy for your own growth open up inside. And this is not selfishness. This is the highest form of rational self-preservation. Their numbers in my phone are still blocked. Our joint account is long gone. Sometimes I wonder, do they remember me? Do they regret? But most of the time, I just don't think about them at all. And in this silence, free from the heavy burden of the past, that long-suffered and well-deserved freedom is finally found.